Can you believe that this Mavic 2 Pro is nearly 3 years old? Doesn't really seem like it, does it? Now that's ancient by DJI drone standards, not to mention the fact it's been completely undercut by the Air 2S that came out recently, along with its 1-inch sensor camera and 10-bit video picture profile. Something has to change. Are they going to discontinue this line, or are they going to replace it? Let's talk about it now. Stewart here from Stewart and Alina, the channel where we learn to do more with less, but don't you worry, we still learn to fly like filmmakers. The drone content is still here and still coming thick and fast. I can tell you that. Now, the successor to the Mavic 2 Pro, I want an 8K camera, I want 1 hour flight time, I want obstacle avoidance the whole way round, I want 50 million gigabytes of internal storage and all this kind of stuff. Of course I'm going to want it. It's going to be amazing whatever they do to replace this. But it's going to be expensive. Do you really need it? You're going to want it, but do you really need it? It's a tricky one because this Air 2S satisfies pretty much all of my professional needs, you could say. Now, nowadays we don't really film weddings anymore, but if we did, this would be more than good enough. A 10-bit video picture profile. It's really, really nice, and it's easy to match with our ground cameras. I'm looking around at the cameras over there. GH5, really super nice 4K camera. So it's great, and it's quite small, and it wasn't that expensive, $999, which isn't a huge amount of money if you're investing in it as a professional tool. This Mini 2 is $449, $999 for the Air 2S. The Mavic 2 Pro still retails, and it's $1,599. Now, no one's going to buy that nowadays when they have the Air 2S. DJI know that. So this one is toast. This needs to be discontinued or replaced, which means we have a little bit of a gap here. Keep in mind that DJI gives us the Inspire 2. Now, we don't talk about that much because it's super expensive and it's for kind of high-end professional work where people are essentially outsourced drone operators for TV companies, film studios, so on and so forth. An entry-level Inspire 2 with a Micro Four Thirds camera costs $5,300, and you can go upwards of $9,000 for that system. Pricey pastime, so it's not really an option for most of us, which means at this kind of $1,500 to $2,000 mark, we have a bit of a gap. But that is expensive. Who is going to buy that? In terms of the hardware, how could things possibly get better? Battery life, 30 minutes or so, I'm happy with that. I don't need more than 30 minutes battery life, to be honest with you. Range, 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers, OcuSync 3.0, it's amazing. I don't need it any more than that. Build quality is amazing these days. There's no exposed wires, there's no fragile components that could really get that damaged. On a light shunt at least, or in transit. The build quality is amazing. It has been so well refined. Flight characteristics. Cast your mind back to the Phantom 2, if you will. Try flying an arc round your wedding couple outside some wedding venue with the Phantom 2. Absolute nightmare, almost impossible to do. Nowadays, we just take it for granted that we switch it into cine mode or tripod mode or normal mode if you've got a bit of experience, and you can just fly that thing however you want. Top speed and power, more of that could be helpful. I have to say the Mavic 2 Pro feels like an absolute beast in the air compared with these two. It's really, really solid, but the more the merrier in that respect. We have certainly flown in some pretty extreme conditions, especially in Scotland where the wind can come in at some rate of knots. Added to that, the wind can bring with it rain, so some form of weather sealing or just semi-weather sealing, you could say, could be helpful. I've got no idea if we would get that, however. It would also be nice to be able to use the FPV goggles with future releases of DJI drones. It was speculated for the Air 2S, but it looks like that's not happening. Now, can DJI come out with some fantastical thing that we can't even imagine? Do you know what I would like to see? Is some kind of semi-FPV mode, not just in terms of the gimbal, which the Air 2S gave us, where we got a nice kind of smooth, undulating, rocking FPV gimbal mode, which was a huge improvement, and I loved it, and we did a video on that. Do check that out. But also in terms of the flight characteristics, could we get one of these non-FPV drones to do a bit of a dive, for example, to do these kind of banking turns, to be able to go up and down? That would be really, really nice. Not full-on FPV, but just some kind of FPV control. Total speculation. But that's the kind of partial revolution that might get me interested, because otherwise, I can't really imagine how these drones can get a whole lot better at this point in the market, at this price level. The big one for us at the end of the day is the camera system. Can it improve so much that there's just no contest between the Air 2S and whatever replaces the Mavic 2 Pro? Let's talk about that in a second, but first things first, a little pitch for some of our premium content. You may or may not know that we have a drone cinematography masterclass, 8 hours of premium education. Let me tell you, an investment in your education will get you far better results than a $2,000 drone versus a $1,000 drone. Some of the best footage that we ever did was shot on the original Mavic Mini. Gear does matter, provided it meets a certain standard, but all of these drones do meet that certain standard. It is very much what you do with it that counts. Be the best filmmaker that you can be, aerial or otherwise. Check out our Drone Cinematography Masterclass. If you're not ready for that, grab yourself a copy of our free ebook From Drone Zero to Drone Hero, 37 Tips to Get You Flying Like a Filmmaker. What for me would be a better camera than that on the Air 2S? Well, for me, it would be a lower noise image with better dynamic range and better performance in low light. Not that I shoot in low light, but it kind of goes hand in hand with better performance throughout your shadows and midtones of the image. What is going to give me that? A bigger sensor. Are we going to get a bigger sensor? Maybe, but I'm not sure. You see, keep in mind that the Inspire series has a Micro Four Thirds camera, the X5S, which takes Micro Four Thirds lenses. This right here is a Micro Four Thirds lens, 42.5mm, which is an 85mm equivalent lens. Now, look at the size of that. Could that go in there? Maybe. Not when you include the camera though, because this is just the lens. You have the X5 camera as well. I don't really know a huge amount about lens manufacture, but I do know that there are physics involved. These are already very, very small, because the Micro Four Thirds sensor is actually quite small compared with a full frame sensor, for example. And full frame sensors have full frame lenses, which are much bigger and much heavier, which is one of the attractions of the Micro Four Thirds system, because you get these little tiny lenses that are lovely. But they're still massive compared with what we're used to on the drone. So are we going to get a Micro Four Thirds sensor on the successor to the Mavic 2 Pro? I'm not sure about that. I have no idea, but I'm not sure. What I suspect we're more likely to get is a faster processor inside there, which is going to give us 8K resolution. It's going to give us 4K at 120 frames per second. And that's all going to be very, very exciting. And a lot of people will like that. But to be honest with you, I'm not really that interested in 8K footage. I certainly don't want to be using those enormous files that will come with 8K footage. You're going to need a nice fast computer. And to be honest with you, resolution, you don't need more resolution. Like, we have enough resolution. 5.4K real time on this Air 2S is already loads. I would take a beautiful cinema quality 1080p image over an 8K image that's of lower quality all day long. But I wonder if that's the route that DJI will have to go down to get better camera performance on this new drone. I don't know, but I'd love to see a bigger sensor in there if possible. I just don't know if it's physically possible. As for interchangeable lenses, yes, I would love to see interchangeable lenses. Think about what most of the shots are that we do on these drones. They're wide-angle shots with everything in focus. And that box is ticked. That box is ticked by iPhones, it's ticked by GoPros, it's ticked by Osmo Pockets, it's ticked by drones. Wide-angle shots with everything in focus is fairly easy to achieve, because that actually plays to the strengths of these tiny sensors. We get deep focus, we get essentially enormous apertures. They're always quoted as f2.8 or something like that, but they're not. If you quote them in full-frame equivalent terms, they're more like f15. Everything is a focus and you're on a wide angle. But what if you want to punch in on your subject and get some shallow depth of field? It's going to be tricky with these tiny sensors, and certainly with those wide focal lengths. So an interchangeable lens, a zoom lens essentially, some kind of telephoto lens, would be very, very cool. What would be more practical, however, is a really good optical zoom lens that gets us closer. And that rings a few bells. Wait a minute. The Mavic 2 Zoom, they did that already. But, so they could make a difference between the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic 2 Zoom, they didn't give the Mavic 2 Zoom a 10-bit picture profile, they didn't give it a 1-inch sensor, and they didn't give it D-Log. So we all went to the Mavic 2 Pro, by and large, for the 1-inch sensor camera. Are we going to get a 1-inch sensor optical zoom? That would be cool. So basically a much better Mavic 2 Zoom. That would get me a bit excited. Because I love the Mavic 2 Zoom, I just didn't really use it that much because I went to the Mavic 2 Pro instead. Variable aperture would be nice. It's probably the only thing really missing on this Air 2S, but it's certainly helpful in terms of tweaking your exposure when you have an ND filter on the drone. As for intelligent flight modes or more smart shooting modes, better HDR video maybe, some of these things could be interesting incremental developments, better implementation of active track, spotlight mode, so on and so forth. Are they going to be good enough though? This is the question. Are they going to be good enough and big enough changes for us to need to buy this drone instead of this drone? That's going to be for you to decide. Let me know what would get you to spend more than $999 on a drone, because for me, I'm struggling to imagine it right now. Yes, I would want the option of maybe some of these better things, but would I be prepared to pay up with it given the astonishing performance of the Air 2S? We'll see. I'm sure DJI have a few surprises up their sleeves. They are, doing pretty well for themselves, and I'm sure they've got a few good ideas. But do remember, it's what you do with the drones that counts. Check out our premium content and grab our ebook. We have a drone comparison chart where you can compare all the features. We've got a lot of free content now. We're really building out the channel. Check out the links below. A lot of things we want to share with you, so do check out some of that information. Anyway, until next time, stay tuned and happy flying.